Since 1974, Claire's has been a top fashion and accessory destination for tween and teenage girls across America. But with mall culture dying out in favor of online shopping, combined with economic recessions and a global pandemic, Claire's has lost its sparkle. This is Intellectual Digest, and today we will be diving into all the news and gossip about the downfall of Claire's. Welcome to Intellectual Digest, your source for all things intelligent, nostalgic, bygone, and most importantly, fun. The story of Claire's actually began back in 1961 when Roland Schaefer, a shopkeeper, founded Fashion Tress Industries, where he sold wigs. Fashion Tress Industries, or FTI, soon became extremely popular in the American South in the 1960s, where there was a large market for quality hairpieces for women. Eventually, Fashion Tress Industries would become the world's largest retailer of fashion wigs. Roland was on his way to bigger and better things. At the same time, in the Midwest, a small chain of retail stores called Claire's Boutiques had begun selling a wide array of accessories, including necklaces, earrings, evening bags, and pins. Claire's Boutiques catered exclusively to women and young girls, particularly teenage girls. Claire's stood out from the other boutiques of the era. When times were hard, as they most definitely were throughout the 1960s, women and their young daughters could purchase inexpensive yet attractive trinkets and accessories to polish off their new outfits for every occasion. I had no idea that Claire's went back to the 60s, but it makes sense. Were you or someone you know a customer of the old Claire's Boutiques or of Fashion Tress Industries? I would love to read your Claire's and FTI stories in the comments section. Even after the turbulence of the 60s abated, those same fashionable females continued to shop at Claire's Boutiques for all their jewelry and accessory needs. The 1970s dawned on the horizon, and American trends were changing rapidly. Women were turning away from fake hairpieces and wigs and were embracing their natural, God-given looks. As a result, the demand for wigs declined significantly, and it was then that Roland Schaefer and Claire's Boutiques crossed paths. Roland needed to diversify and change his business model, and he found just what he needed in Claire's Boutiques. At this point, Claire's Boutiques was a young and up-and-coming business themselves. With 25 outlets in the Chicago area, both FTI and Claire's Boutiques had tremendous potential for growth and recognition. They were perfect for one another. In 1973, Roland Schaefer bought out the Midwestern Claire's Boutique stores and changed his new company's name from Fashion Tress Industries to Claire's Stores Incorporated. In 1978, Claire's began their still popular ear piercing service. A retail legend was born. This transition seemed easy and smooth enough. The decadent and wild 1980s would be testament to mass consumption, and despite some rough patches in the early part of the decade, Claire's stores were a success in the new icons of luxury and excess, the shopping malls that were built all across North America. However, very few people in those early years could never guess just how iconic Claire's would become. The crazy 80s, the heyday of the mall girl, were tailor-made to a store like Claire's, where the motto was, accessorize, accessorize, accessorize. In 1980, Claire's established a sourcing office in Hong Kong. By 1985, Claire's, as it was now commonly referred, reported an astounding $55.9 million in sales, with a totally tubular net income of $6.6 million. In 1986, the numbers were even higher, to the tune of about $74.5 million in sales and $7.5 million in total income. And the New York Stock Exchange traded Claire's stock as high as $15 per share. 1987 was yet another successful year for Claire's overall, but it would, sadly, be the last glimmer of hope for a time. Did any of you shop at Claire's back in the day? What was your favorite product? I would totally love to hear about it. Despite difficult times at the end of the 80s, Claire's was still doing well. In 1988 and 1989, Claire's stock held strong and steady, even after reporting a loss in 1987. In 1988, Claire's managed to haul in an awesome $103.4 million in sales. In 1989, even with fluctuating stock, Claire's was thriving thanks to high sales figures and plenty of foot traffic. The final year of the decade saw Claire's rake in $127.3 million in sales and $7.1 million in total income. 80s girls just couldn't get enough of that cheap bling. In 1988, Roland Schaefer had undertaken some very ambitious expansion plans for the Claire's retail chain as a whole. These plans had the best of intentions, but took their toll on overall sales for Claire's. The expansions and unforeseen challenges that went along with them were the reasons for the lower sales figures in 1987 and 1988. Roland opened 16 new stores all over America. To top things off, Claire's acquired the Japanese retail chain Topkapi. The expansions and addition of Topkapi meant that Claire's exploded to 580 locations very quickly. Unfortunately, even with these new acquisitions and changes, Claire's absolutely floundered in the first half of 1988. But Roland was optimistic. Roland admitted to greed and being a bit too aggressive, and as a result, he temporarily lost control of his shiny empire. Claire's was in the red for the first few months of 1988, but the lean times didn't last long. Roland tightened his reins and started a turnaround by the end of that year. Claire's stock went up once again, and it seemed that all was right in the world. The effort showed. Towards the end of 1988, Roland purchased, for $5 million, a brand spanking new state-of-the-art cash register and inventory tracking system that linked up all of the Claire's stores to the official headquarters in Illinois. How cool is that? Employees of Claire's were trained how to use the new state-of-the-art equipment, and the success and accuracy rate of daily data capture rose from 70% to a near-perfect 99% when entered manually. The modern computer systems and the hiring of Claire's very first director of loss prevention improved Claire's sales numbers. These updates also reduced shrinkage, or theft, of the tens of thousands of small items that were available in every Claire's store and that could easily fit into pockets and purses. Claire's even boasted that their rate of shrinkage was 10% or less of all sales. Thanks to the partnership with Topkapi and other Asian companies, sales of Claire's jewelry, accessories, and trinkets went up. Roland hired new management for his stores, and this stopped the company from suffering any serious hemorrhaging, or loss, of profits before any serious damage could be done to Claire's reputation or their checkbook. Things were looking bright for Roland Schaefer and Claire's. In the spring of 1989, Claire's overall sales were up once again, and the company continued to expand, albeit very carefully and selectively. By July of 1989, Claire's had 650 stores in 47 states and about 4,000 employees, 2/3 of whom were part-time workers. Claire's finished out the decade of excess with a respectable $19.5 million in net income. Not too shabby. In the 90s, the decade of all things alternative, grunge, and anti-establishment, Claire's did everything they possibly could to stay ahead of the pack. Claire's actually beat out their competitors for the first couple of years in the 90s, and the boutique seemed to be thriving. The sales for 1991 increased by 35% from the late 80s, which was due in part to a 7% rise in total sales. Claire's stock went back up too, rivaling the peak of Claire's popularity way back in 1985. In other words, mall chicks were shopping at Claire's. Roland Schaefer planned yet another round of expansions and openings. He was determined to open between 125 and 150 new Claire's stores by the end of 1991. Roland wanted to celebrate the fact that Claire's had revitalized and recharged its ordering system and relationships with their vendors so that they could keep a constant tab on the latest trends, all while delivering the newest and hottest merchandise to stores in less time. The spring of 1992 saw the opening of Claire's affiliate stores. In 1992, there were a grand total of 1,006 Claire's owned and operated stores in 47 states. Of all those stores, 721 were Claire's, 113 were Topkapi, 32 were Dara Michelle, 32 were Arcadia, 20 were Art Explosion, and another 90 stores operated either under the name Artworks or Picture Show. Arcadia, Art Explosion, Artworks, and Picture Show were a bit of a departure from the original Claire's or the other stores, as they sold more than just accessories. Arcadia and Art Explosion were what consumers would call trend or gift shops. They sold mostly calendars, coffee mugs, t-shirts, seasonal items, stationery, posters, and so-called quick sale or checkout counter items. The prices ranged anywhere from $1 to $75, averaging about $5 to $10 in actual sales. Artworks and Picture Show specialized in the graphic arts, like framed posters and art prints. I remember going to Arcadia, Art Explosion, and Topkapi stores when I was a kid. I loved to get notebooks and pencils at these kind of stores. Did you shop at any of these Claire's-owned businesses? Which was your favorite? 1992 turned out to be an extremely difficult year for Claire's, as sales figures suddenly slumped. and the company suffered their first real loss in revenue since 1981. There was a drop in sales all around that year, which Claire's corporate blamed on a number of factors. First of all, Roland Schaefer's neurotic need to expand his accessory empire as quickly as possible nearly ended Claire's run. The redundant and ill-fated opening of Claire's and similar parent stores in outlet malls that had less business, and the unnecessary and excessive markdowns on Easter and Christmas inventory only served to compound the problem by taking up too much space in the stores, which in turn kept new merchandise from being put into rotation on the shelves. It just kept getting bad from there, and it looked like, for a time, that Claire's would never recover. The horrible year that was 1992 also saw the discontinuation and closure of the costly, overpriced artworks and picture show stores, which dealt Claire's and Roland Schaefer a massive blow of about $12 million in revenue loss. Finally, Claire's implemented expensive security cameras in locked display cases to cut down on theft. Roland and the Claire's Corporation as a whole were now backed into a corner. They had to think fast if the Claire's stores were going to be saved. Roland thought of every possible way that he could diversify Claire's without causing more damage. One of those options was a mail-order catalog that sold higher-priced, higher-end items. Another option that Roland considered was to duplicate the model prototype Claire's store that had been opened in Pembroke Pines Mall in a suburb of Miami, Florida, which also just happened to be conveniently situated near Claire's headquarters. The Claire's store in Pembroke Pines was the perfect example of what Roland Schaefer wanted his company to look like. This store was opulently decorated with black marble, mirrors, bright neon, attractive mannequins, and upscale items which included a pair of earrings that retailed for $50. Even after the bad times in 1991 and 1992, Claire's still did relatively good business, earning $22 million in 1992. By this time, Roland Schaefer was still in the business at the age of 76, and every now and then he would toy with the idea of leaving Claire's and finding a buyer to take over his 41% share. Despite his need for constant expansion and acquisition, and threats of retirement, Roland was liked and respected in the retail industry, and he would have never left his beloved boutiques on shaky ground. For once, 1993 ended up being a much better year for Claire's. Thank God. Sales numbers went back up and stayed up, and by the summer of that year, there were a total of 1,060 Claire's stores in 48 out of the 50 states. 1994 proved to be yet another good year for Claire's, as they acquired the rights to a line of stores called Bow Bangles, a popular British chain that had 71 stores in England, Wales, and Scotland. Have you ever been to Bow Bangles? This is the first time I've heard of them. At this time, Claire's made the vast majority of their sales from costume jewelry, which accounted for a huge 64% of total sales. Tween and teenage girls continued to fulfill all of their costume jewelry and accessory needs at Claire's in 1995, and in that same year, Claire's added 85 The Icing stores to their list of affiliates. I absolutely adored the icing growing up. Even with the happy news, there are those cranky cynics who always just have to be critical of current youth culture. And later, in 1995, Claire's reported a slight loss due to what the Claire's corporate office referred to as the lack of a discernible, significant fashion trend. Whatever. As if. Then, in the last few months of 1995, Claire's corporate spent $7.4 million on a new distribution facility in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, making their triumphant return to the Chicago area where everything had started. 10 years earlier, the Claire's distribution facility in Wooddale, Illinois had opened, and was still serving Claire's locations throughout the Midwest, with up to 5 merchandise shipments to various nearby Claire's stores each week. However, this didn't include some of Claire's imported goods, like certain brands of tote bags and costume jewelry. The Wooddale Distribution Center remained open until the new facility opened in June of 1996. That same year, Claire's welcomed 31 accessory place stores into the family. The icing stores, after a devastating stock split and filing for Chapter 7 protection, saw 85 redesignations of icing stores in prime locations, which included all of the retail equipment, fixtures, and furniture. Simply put, Claire's stepped in to help their baby sister and were remodeling and moving things around. The Claire's stores that were affected by all of these changes promised loyal customers that they would reopen in time for summer 1996. Claire's wanted to reopen those icing locations as the new, rebanded Claire's Accessories, even if no other existing Claire's store existed in that particular mall. Some of the locations remained icing stores, but also underwent remodeling and refurbishing. Despite these unnecessary changes, Claire's and Roland Schaefer were over the moon, thanks to record sales and earnings. Roland stated publicly that the year 1996 had been everything we expected it to be. Costume jewelry accounted for the majority of sales. Do you think Roland was smart in his decision to take on all these remodeling projects? Was it necessary? Did any of you watching or listening work at Claire's or Icing during this period in the 90s? I always want to hear retail and mall job stories. 1997 and 1998 were witness to more drama and excitement in the long, arduous history of Claire's and their associated stores. By 1997, the new Claire's accessories stores were ready for business within a relatively short 3 months. The Claire's accessories stores lived up to their name, and were very well organized and well stocked with all the latest 90s trends in costume jewelry, purses, sunglasses, tote bags, gift items, and ear-piercing services and supplies. 1998 saw the arrival of Claire's-owned Bijou One stores out of Switzerland. Claire's could now boast more than 1,500 locations worldwide, with between 15 and 20 stores in Canada, 110 to 115 stores in the United States, and the addition of 30 stores in Japan. 142 of those stores were Claire's accessories, with the average store taking up roughly 919 square feet in both enclosed and open-air shopping malls. In 1999, Claire's purchased Cleopatra, a French chain, for $11 million. The Claire's outlet stores including Bijou One, Cleopatra, Beau Bangles, Dara Michelle, The Icing, L'Accessory, and Topkapi were often located near one another in malls everywhere. This act of clustering was a genius marketing strategy and kept administrative and supervision costs to a bare minimum. This also made it easier for Claire's to refurbish and redecorate their stores, which, for some reason, they did on a regular basis. Back in the day, you could get everything you needed for the school dance in one general area. It was pure genius. 1999 was the year of Y2K mania, when everyone thought the world was coming to an end. But Claire's was partying the decade away. Claire's and The Icing were some of the coolest places to get accessories and school supplies back in the day. In the old spirit of expansion, Claire's bought the right to yet another franchise, the American chain Afterthoughts. Afterthoughts were converted to Icing stores once they were acquired. Sales were high, promotional costs were low, and things were looking good for Claire's and their associated properties as the year 2000 approached. Roland Schaefer was still the president, chairman, and CEO of Claire's at this point in time, but 3 other members of the Schaefer family, Sylvia, Maria, and Bonnie, signed on as vice president of fashion merchandising, and vice president of Southeast Region Real Estate, respectively. Sylvia, Maria, and Bonnie were beloved, trusted members of Claire's corporate team, and these ladies had definitely inherited Roland's business savvy. They were poised and ready to lead Claire's into the 21st century. In 2001, Claire's.com was established and was massively popular. In 2002, Claire's purchased the clothing chain Mr. Rags. Claire's continued to be a main fixture of the mall, and in 2005, they became a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. But then, Claire's went private when they were acquired by equity firm Apollo Global Management in a $3.1 billion, yes, billion, leveraged buyout, which was finalized in 2007. Then, in 2008, despite a faltering economy, Claire's consolidated all European outlets into a single headquarters in Birmingham, England. The transitional 2010s continued the Claire's saga into their final reported decade of success. In 2010, Claire's opened their first locations in Ukraine, and in 2011, Claire's got in on the e-commerce craze and opened more stores in India and Mexico. In 2012, Claire's made their presence known in China, Italy, Indonesia, Luxembourg, the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Honduras. Despite all of that continued expansion and international recognition, the days of Claire's and the concept of the mall in general were quickly becoming relics of the past. Claire's.com continued to do respectable business, but it just wasn't the same. Claire's opened international offices in Paris and Madrid, but it was kind of too little, too late for the US locations. In 2018, Claire's was forced to file for the dreaded Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the States. The last time I was in Claire's, it was just sad. It's lost its appeal for me, and even the website is nowhere near what it was 10 years ago. Are you still a Claire's shopper? Do you think they'll ever come back or reflect their former success from past decades? Let me know in the comments section after the video. As usual, it seems that when things are finally going well, there is often a hammer to come and smash everything to pieces. Claire's is no stranger to controversy and criticism. Unfortunately, Claire's has been accused of selling products that contain traces of asbestos as well as talcum powder, which is sometimes used in makeup for both body and face. In March of 2019, the FDA and Claire's butted heads when it was believed that the retailer was selling asbestos-laced merchandise. Claire's swore that they had confidence in everything that was sold in their stores, but eventually, the company voluntarily recalled the offending merchandise and told customers to stop buying and using those items. A couple of months later, Claire's was in hot water yet again when a JoJo Siwa makeup kit was recalled due to, yet again, the presence of asbestos. Seriously, Claire's? You would think someone would be in charge of quality control, but it doesn't seem that way. Claire's actually tried to say that the supposed amounts of asbestos in the JoJo Siwa palette met with European and Canadian safety and quality standards, and that they had ended the use of talc powder and asbestos in their products. What a lie! Claire's also swore up and down, once again, that they are not aware of any adverse reactions, injuries, or illness caused by the possible presence of asbestos in the recalled products. Really, Claire's? In response to all the controversy about her merchandise in Claire's stores, JoJo Siwa posted a video on her social media where she informed her fans that Claire's was accepting refunds of her products, both new and used, claiming that she puts her trust in other people's hands, and was working closely with Claire's to recall and take the products off the shelves. Did you ever purchase anything from Claire's that looked suspicious or was found to contain asbestos? Did you get your money back? Tell me about it after the video. The COVID-19 pandemic was hard on a lot of companies, and Claire's was no exception. Young girls are still buying costume jewelry and cute handbags, but not at the rate that they were in the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s. As of 2022, Claire's has attempted to come back from their bankruptcy, and this year they've reported their recorded sales growth from 2021 at 53%, on top of $1.4 billion. I don't know about you, but I'm not buying what they're selling with those figures. Claire's has a new strategy in mind, though, which includes closing stores that are underperforming in favor of locations in prestige or higher-end malls, online sales, and kiosks in drug and grocery stores. To Claire's, I hope that your strategies come to fruition and that you can come back bigger and stronger. I also hope you've learned your lesson about what goes into the products you sell. To that end, that'll be all for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out here at Intellectual Digest. As usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and tell your friends and family about the channel. Also, if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear from you. I'll see you next time. Have an intellectual, relevant day.